Hi, it is Cindy Hodnett here, your host for Behind the Scenes podcast. We are, of course, still coming to you remote from multiple locations around the world today. We're coming from North Carolina, from Las Vegas. And of course, our guest today, Toma Clark Haines, is in Venice, Italy. Toma, thank you, first of all, for being willing to spend some time with us today and tell us about your experience and what's happening there.
Cindy, it's an absolute pleasure to be here. You know you're one of my favorite people at Market.
Thank you very much. That's wonderful pandemic news. Thank you. Well, first of all, let's bring our viewers and our listeners a little bit up to date on the journey you're having. When did your stay in place begin there in Venice?
So the official quarantine, I think, started on the 4th of March, but I had been on an around the world trip in January. You and I had seen each other in a few places, and I landed back here in January. I was on an around the world trip, and then February I was in Cambodia for most of the month on a writer's retreat. And I landed here February 20th, and when I landed, they swabbed me when I got off the plane. And the next day was when Carnival was canceled here in Venice. I had visitors coming in for Carnival a day after I arrived.
Oh, wow.
And Carnival was canceled. And so kind of sheltering in place started around the 20th and full-on quarantine around the 4th of March. So yeah. I've been alone for a while. I'm thrilled to talk to you.
And I'm thrilled to talk to you as well. It's definitely a nice perspective. One of the reasons I was so eager to talk to you is, of course, I've been sort of following your journey on social media, and it's been fascinating. Tell our listeners again a little bit about the initial reaction of the community around you. How did our beloved Italians react to shelter in place and quarantine?
Well, it was interesting because when it was first announced that Carnival was canceled, I think all of Venice was so surprised because, first of all, this is one of the most important times financially for the year for Venice. But also, it was so bizarre walking out in the middle of the streets in Carnival when normally it's crowded and every cafe is empty. And they started a campaign, which I found so wonderfully endearing, where all the grand cafes on the Piazza San Marco, so all of the famous cafes that normally have, $30 cocktails, they said everyone who comes gets one Prosecco free. And so they did this amazing, come have a spritz. And they invited all the locals in town to come celebrate in the piazza. And it was so amazing going to the Piazza San Marco and seeing locals. It wasn't filled with tourists. So my initial response when I saw the Italians gathering, it was really heartwarming because the Venetians were starting to honestly, the Venetians were getting their city back. When you live here, when you live in Venice, you have to navigate your life around tourists. So I go out in the morning before the tourists arrive. I go out before 11 a.m. and I go out after 6, 7 p.m. But between 11 and 6, I try not to go outside because that's when it belongs to the tourists. And so in a way, the Venetians got their city back for a while, which is, it's been a nice way of seeing it. They need tourism to return in order for the city just financially to survive. But there is a very special magic happening at this moment.
Well, and not to be too flippant about it, but wow, I can't imagine many things better than discounted or free Aperol spritz. I mean, come on,
Exactly.
That's awesome.
So that was the initial response. And then it came out that, okay, large gatherings of people, not a good idea. And then the quarantines went into effect. And the quarantine was actually pretty severe. It's for sure, I think, more severe than almost anyone I know in other countries. So I've not really been out of my house hardly at all since March 4th. We're allowed to go to the grocery store and the pharmacy, but you're only allowed to go 200 meters from your house, which 200 meters is like 1/10 of a mile.
Wow.
So when you think of going 1/10 of a mile from your house, that's not very far. As of 2 days ago, they now allow us to go outside to exercise 1 hour a day, or to have sunshine, which that's been the hardest thing for me not being able to leave the house. So we can now leave the house 1 hour a day for sunshine or exercise. And they've now opened up 2 more types of stores, bookstores and children's clothing stores.
Oh, interesting. Wow. Well, I would imagine this sort of gradual easing, even though that seems like a much more significant term than what you're describing. I'm sure that's coming along with sort of a shift in attitude for a lot of people. As you've been there and you're counting the weeks and the days, what kind of changes have you noticed about your own mindset? I mean, how has your mind shifted since you started staying in place?
There's 2 phrases I have said repeatedly on social media in the last couple of months. One is perfection is dead, and 2, normalcy is dead. And I have spent the majority of my life trying to make everything perfect. And you realize when you're in a situation where you have no control, you really realize that perfect doesn't matter. And so I will say I've become much more relaxed, which is, I think, is a positive outcome. Overall, having had this much time to think, I don't own a television, I don't really watch TV. And so having this much time to think has been amazing. My friends all joke. They're like, when did you become a philosopher? I'm like, where are these deep thoughts coming from? But for sure, I've spent a lot of time just really, I think, contemplating life, contemplating what matters to me. And my whole life, I've been too emotional. And I've always viewed it as a negative. I've always viewed my emotions or my thoughts. I hear too much in my head, and I've always wanted to censor it. And during this time, I've just completely removed the censor. And what I find is that because I'm able to feel my emotions and identify my emotions, I'm able to connect with other people, but also help other people to process their own emotions as I process mine. So
wow,
it's been a humbling experience.
It's a gift. It's a gift as well. I think some of your social posts have just spoken to so many people because you're verbalizing and vocalizing what a lot of folks are feeling and maybe don't quite know how to process.
Thanks a lot. We're putting all of them into a new blog format. I have 2 companies. I have Antiques Diva, which is what everyone knows me for. I have another company called The Republic of Toma. The Republic of Toma website is basically becoming a blog because I started getting so many friend requests on social media that I realized, okay, I was just posting my thoughts in a format that I knew I could interact with people, and it became overwhelming because one of the posts was shared more than 100 times.
Wow.
So we're now putting them on a blog.
Wonderful, wonderful. Well, along with this sort of contemplation and time for, really delving into your thoughts, how have you adjusted your lifestyle? You've implemented some self-care practices. Talk a little bit about those as well.
My entire life has changed. My entire way of being has changed, but also my business. The reality is with Antiques Diva, we're a tour-based business. I work in antiques, but we do antique buying tours. If our clients aren't traveling, then we don't really have business. So I've started watching my life, everything falling away from me. And I had this really weird experience in December. A colleague of mine bought me a Christmas present that I honestly did not know how to respond. I considered saying no because it kind of made me uncomfortable. A colleague bought me a reading with a psychic.
Oh, wow.
And I know, I was I was so surprised. And so I said, okay, well, she bought me this reading. So I met with the psychic, and the psychic said, okay, you have 4 walls crashing around you. By the way, this all does tie back to self-care, I promise you. This rabbit trail
following
goes
with you.
So she said, you have 4 walls crashing down around you. And I thought, okay, I'm in the middle of a divorce. I'm having a problem with my visa. This seems about right. Oh yeah, I'm in the middle of an audit. Well, there's 3 walls. 4 is just like it's a metaphor. And when this happened with the virus, and I saw literally my business disappearing, and I thought, I don't have income coming in for the next year through traditional means. Right. When I saw this happening, I thought, well, there was the 4th wall. So it was kind of fascinating having had this weird psychic opportunity. So the psychic, she tells me, you've got these 4 walls. And then she says, okay, we're going to do 3 sets of cards. We're going to do your past, we're going to do your present, and we're going to do your future. And she pulls the cards for the past. And she said, this is funny. All your cards for the past say self-care. And literally when I moved to Venice, I moved to Venice 2 years ago, and I moved here because I just wasn't happy. I was really struggling in a lot of ways. And when I moved here, I implemented so many self-care things, one of which was trying to get balance in my life so I wasn't traveling as much, so that I was home more, so that I was cooking myself dinners. I was spending evenings reading in my living room, cooking myself beautiful dinners, by the way. I like to cook. But there were a lot of things I started doing in that last year. I started journaling every day. I started going to bed at 9:00 at night, like ridiculously early. My friends make fun of me. And I started going to the gym 2-3 times a week. And I had started also experimenting with crystals. And it was because I mentioned the Republic of Toma is where my new blog is. That's the name of my jewelry collection that I designed a few years ago and that we sell in 5 countries. And when I had started designing jewelry, I intuitively had been driven to using certain stones, and I didn't know the meanings of them. Later, after I'd already designed the collection, I found out that the stones I had chosen were like a magnifying glass into my soul. It was like, let me just put all my emotions on the table for everyone to see. Because people who knew about stones, they could see the patterns of what the stones represented. And again, I didn't understand this is what I was doing. It was just intuitively, I liked rose quartz. And so I would choose that. And so I talked to a geologist at the time, and I told him, I said, hey, this is what I've noticed. I said, is this absolute like bull malarkey? And he goes, actually, no. He said, from a science perspective, if your body needs potassium, it craves a banana. He's like, why can't, if your body needs, for example, you're going through a divorce, if your body needs love, why wouldn't you be drawn to rose quartz? And it like pushed the realms of possibility to have a scientist tell me this was possible.
Wow.
And so the psychic tells me, in the past, I see self-care, and it really fit. It's what the last 2 years of my life have been about. But then she drew the present cards, and the present cards were self-care. And then she drew the future cards, and the future cards were self-care.
Wow.
Now, honestly, if it were not for self-care, I would not be surviving. I've been alone for 2 months, and I would not be surviving if it weren't for self-care. I never have been into aromatherapy, but just before this began, I was given an aromatherapy kit of like 30 different scents. Mm-hmm. Well, every day, I have a diffuser in my shower, and I have one next to my bed, and I have one in my office. And every day I pick whatever sounds good. Well, I started Googling what are like the aromatherapy benefits. It's the same as with the stones. Intuitively, I'm drawn to what I need. I'm stressed out. I'm drawn to rosemary. I'm tired. I'm fatigued. I'm drawn to something else. And it's what I'm learning about self-care and wellness is that your body knows what it needs. If we listen to our body's going to help itself. So
yeah, it's really fascinating. Given what you're learning, as a designer and as a businesswoman, how would you see this transitioning into the consumer world and what they choose for their home when we're, all out and about again?
I think that there is a complete mindset shift that's going to happen, or that is currently happening. While we're in this global self-sheltering mode, the entire world, I feel like, has been put inside a cocoon. All this transformation happens when the caterpillar goes from goo to the wings of a butterfly. And it's kind of what I think is happening in the world right now. So I think when we come out, there's going to be a massive shift, not just in mindset, but in the way that we approach things. And from a mindset perspective, in the past, for the last however many hundreds of years, it's been about money, it's been about power, it's been about control. And now I believe the world's going to be a better place, where now you have scientists and politicians who have to work together. The plague birthed the Renaissance, so you have artists coming out of this. You have collaboration, you have communication, and you have the pursuit of beauty. And I think that's where, when I look at the interior design industry and how this will impact the design industry, there is going to be a desire, a need for beauty, because beauty heals us.
We were speaking actually with Catherine Ireland last week, and we were asking her, about her own interior, how she had furnished her own interior. And she was speaking like, I have an Italian chair here and a French table here. And it was really sort of very much the global, the worldwide chic kind of thing. I think that's been popular for a while. Given that, what kind of categories of either vintage or antique or discoverable treasures would you think would in particular appeal to consumers after we emerge from this cocoon?
I think for sure, actual functional pieces. There's going to be even things as simple as like a secretaire that has storage or cupboards that have storage. But I also think art de la table, the just beautiful arts of living and sitting down with your family because you're actually doing dinner with your family when you've been standing and eating in your kitchen before. I can for sure see accessories doing well after this. And I can tell you already, just the phone call I had right before this was with a client who's opening a new store. And she called me and she said, Toma, can I buy from you? I can't come over to Europe, but before the store opens, I think we need more accessories, more tabletop. She's like, I feel like people, it's when I see what everybody's posting on Instagram, everyone's posting pictures of their dinners. She's like, I want to have more of that type of inventory in my store. So I do think that that's going to be big. But in general, pieces that are functioning, that are have a purpose, are always what consumers want when it comes to antiques. That's what sells best.
I think it's fascinating, though, that you mentioned tabletop. I mean, and as you were explaining that, it makes perfect sense. It's sort of the return to almost an appreciation for entertaining that we've been too busy to have before. Would that be an accurate assessment?
I think we're having this return to gracious living. We have the time. We've been too busy. During this period, when it first happened and I went into quarantine, I was before most of the world, and I was calling people all over. And I called some really big names and said, hey, I need advice. I need to do some business repositioning. Tell me what you think. What everybody has said has been, it's just life has been so busy. It's actually kind of nice to have just some weeks at home. And people say it, they're almost guilty saying that they don't want to confess that they needed a break, but I think a lot of people really needed that break. They needed a moment to slow down and to prioritize on what actually mattered, what they cared about. And this return to living with beauty, living with grace, living with balance, and that ties back into the wellness question. That's, I think, very much the mentality of what people need, and it's going to impact how we live. It has to.
And not even on sort of the more humorous side, not to mention that people have been inside their homes and they are seeing maybe all of the things that they want to update.
Oh, for sure.
That they haven't been thinking about for a while, perhaps.
For sure.
Well, we would be remiss if we didn't talk more about life there in Italy. Unfortunately, haven't been in a year or so, but tell us about some of your favorite places there, local places in Venice or Italy in general.
First of all, I want to talk about antiques because, that's kind of what I do. So Mercantinfiera is Italy's largest antiques fair, and it's one of the best places to buy antiques in Italy. So I would be remiss if I didn't give them a shout out and say, put them on your radar for the future. But speaking here in Venice, so I live in the district of San Marco. I live directly opposite the Peggy Guggenheim Museum. I'm on a side canal. There are worse places to live, I will say. My dad keeps joking when I talk to him. He's like, how are you doing in your gilded cage? It is hard to get sympathy, when you're in Venice. But no, so in my district, there are a couple of places that I'd love to give shout outs to, partially because they're personal friends of mine, in addition to my favorite places to go in Venice. And pretty much any one of these places, if you were to go in and say, Signorina Toma sent me, they would all say, "Oh, Toma." So
I love that.
yeah, tell them Signorina Toma sent you. So first of all, actually, the Gritty Palace, people don't think of. I mean, it's a 5-star hotel. People don't think of it as some place that locals would actually go. Believe it or not, the Gritty Palace bar, the Langi bar, is still a place that the locals go, and I will say, it is a genteel meeting spot for the locals. It's 2 blocks from my house, and every time I go, I run into someone I know. I find it really endearing that locals still go to this place that should belong to the tourists, but they've claimed it as their own. So Gritty Palace, for sure go. And if you go, you need to order what is called the last cocktail. And the last cocktail is made with pear juice, gin, and Prosecco with a little squirt of lemon, I believe.
Oh.
And it's my favorite. It's my favorite cocktail there. I don't even have to order it. I just walk in and they give me the last cocktail first. It's the first and last. Okay. Then there's a website called Truly Venice. And Truly Venice is apartment rentals, and they're luxury apartment rentals so that you can live in Venice like a local, even if you're here just a few days. And friends of mine own the company, and they have maybe 100 apartments, and they're hand chosen. One of my diva guides, Kiara, is actually one of the decorator who helps decorate the apartments. So there's a lot of antiques used in these in these properties. And 3 restaurants I will mention. One is called Local. The reason it's called Local is because they source everything locally, all their vegetables, all their fish. So it's using local goods. And it's 2 young Venetians, a brother and sister. They went out and they wanted to start something new. And they're what I would call the new generation of Venetians who are trying to save the city so that it doesn't just become Disneyland. So Local is a favorite restaurant. Umbre de Leon. Umbre de Leon is in the building where the Biennale takes place, and not where the Biennale takes place, where the Biennale offices are. And it is the best food in all of Venice, and it is right smack in the middle of downtown, and you would never know how to get there unless you knew to go inside the office buildings of the Biennale.
Wow.
So it's a secret that nobody knows to go to. And the last place I'll mention is a place called Le Café, and it's a French name for a cafe on the Campo Santo Stefano. And there are 2 cafes on the square. One is called Paulin, and Paulin is where the posh Venetians go to have their spritz. But it's just like it's a casual cafe, but it's where you would go to have your spritz in the middle of the afternoon and watch people walk by. And Le Café, the waiters there, literally, they have been my family since I moved here. Like if there's ever any problem in my life, they are the people I go to. And they serve great food at amazingly good prices, and they're just kind, good people. And we like good people.
Ah, that's fabulous. I hope you didn't hear me scribbling frenetically in the background.
I can send it to you in writing.
That's fantastic. Well, I think it begs the question, anyone who has traveled in Italy for any length of time has at least a feel for the culture and the atmosphere. What are you seeing or hearing about, how the Italians intend to get back to their new normal?
It's going to be gradual, just like I already said, the opening the bookstores, the opening the children's stores. I think it's going to be fascinating from a cultural perspective to see what opens next. It shows where the Italians' values are in that they opened children's stores because children have high value in Italy. And they opened bookstores because Italians are very intellectual. I mean, they discuss very intellectual subjects and very literary and very cultured people overall. So I think from a cultural perspective, I'm dying to know what they choose to open next, because I wouldn't have thought of a bookstore as being what they considered essential. But so gradually stores are going to start opening up. Eventually the borders will start opening again. And at some point when travel is allowed, what I would say people can do if they want to truly make a difference for the locals is I would say come for more than a day or two. Because what people
Mm-hmm.
usually do is they come to Italy and they make this grand tour of Italy. So they hit Rome, they maybe hit Amalfi Coast, they pop up to Florence, maybe they pop over to Pisa, and from Pisa,
Mm-hmm.
they eat pizza in Pisa. And from Pisa, then maybe they go to Milan to see the Last Supper just for an afternoon, and then they're here in Venice and they stay the night and they fly out. What I would say is, if you come to Italy, what you can do to make a difference in the local economy, the local community, is to go and stay and be in one place. And to come to Venice and stay for, if you have 7 days of vacation or 5 days or 2 weeks or whatever, come and stay that whole time in one location. It will change your life, because what will happen
Mm-hmm.
is you will have Italian best friends in that city for the rest of your life. Like literally, you don't have to show up for 3 more years. And when you show up, you're going to be greeted with hugs and kisses. And you're also going to get experiences that would never happen otherwise. You will be invited into people's homes. You will be invited into people's lives. After this, what we're all looking for is deeper connections. It's for sure I live alone, and it's what I've realized how important my friendships are, that I wouldn't have survived without my friends these last 2 months.
Absolutely. And switching gears just a little bit, because of course you and I often see each other at markets, along with a trip to Italy. I hope a trip to market will be in your near future. But, thinking about that and the connections sort of within the home furnishings and the gift industries, what are you most looking forward to when you next get back to market?
Anytime you've ever interviewed me, when you ask what I liked about market, I'm like, it's the people, but it is the people. So the very first thing I'm going to do when I go back to High Point is I'm going to look at the Curry & Co. party schedule, and I will start with that before I do anything else. I will find out their party schedule, and then I'm going to mark that on my calendar, and then I will book my speaking engagements when they're not conflicting with parties.
I love it.
The last several years, I've gone to market and I've been so busy. It's like I have my own furniture collection, the Antiques Diva collection by Aidan Gray, and we were in the middle of launching that, and there's so many meetings, and then you have speaking engagements and you have activities, and I found I was going to High Point and missing people. And what I really want is to go into the High Point Antique and Design Center and see all the vendors and talk to them and look at what they're selling. And confession, I always end up buying something I shouldn't, but I do.
Don't we all?
I know.
Oh, that's fantastic. Well, we are going to continue to follow you, not just during pandemic, but beyond. You've mentioned a couple of things. What does the near future hold for you? What do you see happening for yourself over the next 6 months to a year?
Well, as I said, for sure, our Antiques Diva tours, they're going to be on the back burner. So they're not closing down, but they're also, we just simply don't have clients.
Yeah.
And what that means is, as a company, we're mostly independent contractors, but we're 31 people strong. And a lot of people don't realize the size and the scale of what we do. I mean, we're in 16 countries. And so we're now looking at how do we restructure this to make money. And one of the things we launched 2 years ago was our antique dealer training and mentoring program. And that honestly, I think will save my butt this year. But one of the things I extended it to is now we're working with smaller stores. Still, they need to be more artisan influenced, like artisanal type stores. But I've taken on 2 new clients. Doing business coaching with them. Then you see that I've been doing lots of writing. Last time I saw you, I told you I was writing a book. And what I've realized in this time alone is that writing is what I'm called to do. And Antiques Diva began as a blog. I mean, it began as a book that I was writing a book. The book became a blog. It was 2008. The recession killed the book, and I got a publisher, and then the publisher contacted me and said, okay, we're actually killing the project. And I'd written this book that went nowhere. And so, but then I was blogging, and the blog became my business. And it's funny because I'm now 12 years later, my book became a blog. The blog became a business. The business, truthfully, what it's becoming right now again is we're becoming a blog again.
just for reference, how can small retailers learn more about the training program that you mentioned as well? Is there a website where they can go?
It's antiquedealertrainingprogram.com. We do not have a separate site for retailers in general. However, it will be happening.
So that can be the reach out.
It gives a temporary spot for landing on that. But really, someone can just reach out to me direct, Toma at antiquesdiva.com, or on any of our social medias, Antiques Diva or the Antiques Diva & Co. or Republic of Toma. And I'm here. I'm not going anywhere.
I love it. And I should mention to our listeners as well that we will have a video version of this podcast up on YouTube with some of your photography of Venice and some of your personal items additionally. So they can be sure and check that out. As we wrap up, I think one of the things that I really enjoy hearing from people is what are the little gems of discovery, the little nuggets of wisdom that they're taking away from this experience. What about you? How will you be different on this other side?
I think more comfortable with myself, to be honest. I've always felt like I've known myself pretty well, but since I've been single, my ex-husband and I've been separated 5 years, but are only now finally finalizing this divorce, interestingly enough, during the middle of quarantine. So that's lovely. But during the last 5 years, I've struggled with being alone. I've struggled with being single. I've really struggled a lot with this entire concept of solitude versus loneliness. And what I have learned in quarantine is I've learned solitude. And I've spent a long time thinking that I was lonely. And in fact, I'm a great date. I thoroughly love myself, and I don't even have to shave my legs. And so I've learned to be alone, and that is a gift that will serve me the rest of my life.
That's fantastic. Well, Toma, we can't wait to see what you do next. As always, it is delightful. I can't wait to see you in person and give you a huge hug and go on to the next adventure. Until then, my goodness, thank you so much for being with us today.
I really appreciate it. And by the way, I feel like next time you see me, there's going to be a lot more of me to hug because I am eating like nobody's business. So you may have to extend your arms extra wide.
The food looks really good on your social pages. I'm going to leave it there.
I treat myself well.
Yes,
so much.
Please take care. And we'll talk to you again soon.
Perfect. Thanks so much.
All right. Thanks, Toma. Bye-bye.
Bye.